Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice three-game WNBA slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? The big questions today are going to be how do we utilize Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese on the slate? They're going to be fairly popular. Their prices have come up a lot, and we'll answer that question as we go through. We do have one core play today. That's Aja Wilson for Las Vegas. Now, she is super expensive and going to be somewhat hard to roster, but there's enough value on the slate I think you can find that you can get her in there. So she's definitely a great play on the slate and the top overall option. She's putting up 50 fantasy points a game regularly. She has no signs of stopping, and she's the best play on the slate by a wide margin. There's only a couple of players that can even match her fantasy output at any given day, and she's been wildly consistent at it so far. So I think she's in a really good spot here. This game being on the road really hasn't affected her at all. In fact, she plays better on the road than she has on at home. So I think that, at least from a scoring perspective, so I think she has a lot of upside today. Let's look at our next plays. So the big question mark today will be how do we utilize Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, and if we should put them in our lineups or not. So both of them, their prices have come up a lot. But let's talk about Angel Reese first. She's handing out double doubles every single game for a while. Her price has come up as a result, but she still has a higher ceiling than the way she's playing. Her first matchup versus Las Vegas. This is her first matchup versus Las Vegas. So, but their defense is not super, so I don't think she's got too much at risk there. The question here is if she can score enough real points to get the fantasy point output that we need today. She needs about 37 fantasy points today, and she's been getting that quite a bit. But she does have a slightly lower floor than what we would like here. So she's a good play, but she's not a must play from that perspective. And because of her price point just being so high, it's hard to be super confident she's going to hit it. But if she gets a double double and scores, 12 to 15 real points at the very least, then I think she has that opportunity. And she's probably a bit one of the safer plays in this, sub over $10,000 price points at least. She's probably my second favorite at that price point. Then we'll look at Caitlin Clark. Now, Clark has been phenomenal lately. She's averaging 40 fantasy points a game for Seattle this season as well, and her scoring has been more consistent in the last four games. She has as high ceiling as anyone on the slate, and she has played a lot better on the road than at home this season. Her shooting on threes is 38% from three on the road, where it's only 30% at home. So this game being on the road also helps her. I think uh, she, her uh, total numbers are just about the same both ways, but her shooting has been better. So I think that the way she's playing right now, she's definitely in play. As she does have a high ceiling, but uh, she does have a lower floor, and so that's going to be risky here. I do think she's a little bit overpriced here because of that. So it's going to be a little bit harder to roster her as a result. But if you want to use Angel Reese and Clayton Clark, then you can use both of them together if you really want to. But I just think that her upside here against Seattle is really good. It's just a little bit of risky play because she has a lower floor, but she's been on a heater the last four games, so she's definitely worth a look from that perspective. Then we're going to look at two Seattle players. That's going to be Ezi Magbagor. Sorry for butchering your name. And Nika Aguamike. So sorry again for butchering your names. So anyhow, for Ezi, she needs 35 fantasy points to pay off. I don't really see too much room for her as she's only going to score. So she's going to be in the 32 to 40 fantasy point range, I think. So she doesn't have a super high ceiling, but she doesn't have a super low floor either. She's been playing pretty consistent, and she's got a very good matchup against Indiana, who she's done pretty solid against with 237 fantasy point games approximately. She's got good upside and has good rebounding numbers. Now, she doesn't score quite as much as some of the other players available, and that is the big risk here, really, is that she doesn't get as many real points. But she does have double double potential, or if she gets a double double, she'll definitely pay off. But if she can, if as long as she gets close, she's going to be fine. But her teammate Agwu Mike is also in a very similar situation. Now she scores a little bit more in the real points most games, but she doesn't quite get as many rebounds. So she's a little bit more scoring dependent, but she definitely has some good upside here. Her price is low enough that she has some added upside today in a plus matchup against Indiana as well, a team she's averaging almost 40 fantasy points a game against. So both of them do average around 39 fantasy points against Indiana this season and the 2 games so far, and they both have similar upside. One's a little bit safer from a just because she gets multiple statistical categories in Ezzy, but Nikia also has good potential today, and they're virtually the similar price point. So they both have a ton of upside on the slate, and they're two ladies that I would definitely consider trying to figure out how to roster both of them, especially if you don't use Aja Wilson like this. So that's definitely a strategy on the slate as well. So let's go ahead and look at our next group of players here. So Jackie Young for Las Vegas looks very interesting today. It is a little bit of a tougher matchup. She hasn't faced Chicago this season, but she has been really good on the road, especially shooting wise, has really been a lot better. Now she's been inconsistent, so she is a bit of a bigger bust play. She's been it's hard to love her here, but she has upside, especially tougher matchup defensively definitely is a concern, but she has a high ceiling, and so that's where we're going to look here. If she hits some threes, then she can definitely pay off here. But if she doesn't, then she can definitely be somebody that really messes up your lineups a lot. Looking at Lloyd for Seattle, now she's been a little bit inconsistent lately. Her 3-point shooting has really been bad the last few games, and her price has dropped down considerably because of her play the last couple of games. That said, she has really good upside based on this price point. Being almost $1,000 cheaper than where she's been most of the season. I think she has a lot of upside here, and if she can find her footing here, she only needs 32 fantasy points to pay off, and she's been well above that quite a few times. And she has a favorable matchup against Indiana, which is a perfect situation for her to get going again, and she can definitely be a solid play here. Uh, so I think she's one of my close to. I was really thinking about making her a core play. She's very borderline on that front. Her teammate, though, Skylar Diggins Smith, is also in play. Now, she's a little bit more consistent than Lloyd has been lately, but she has a lower ceiling. And so that is probably a similar situation. She definitely feels a little bit more like Ezzy Magbear from Seattle as well, as that she's probably not going to have a super high ceiling, but she's also not got a super low floor either. And so I think she's a very viable option. Though she needs around 31 fantasy points to pay off, which is about what she's getting this season for the most part. So she has had a couple of random floor games, and her been a little inconsistent against Indiana so far this season. And one game she was pretty terrible, only 10 fantasy points. But just the shooting sometimes can be off, and if her shooting is off, then that would really hurt her today. But I still think she's a really solid play on the slate. Some other plays to look at: Bonner for Connecticut. Now, she's been really inconsistent this year, but her best 2 games were versus Washington, and she had 40. She does have 40 fantasy point upside today as a result of that. So she is a high risk player, but she has some potential today. She just has a super low floor, so you do have to deal with that on this kind of slate. So she's a contrarian play or a GPP only play. Uh, Camila Cardoso for Chicago has a very favorable matchup here. Um, her ceiling is not much higher. Sorry, her price has increased a lot. Her production has been solid in 4 of the past 5 games. Her price makes it harder to roster here, though, because of that. And she doesn't have the highest of ceilings, and her minutes are still a little bit sporadic, so she's not a great play, but she's somebody to consider as a kind of a contrarian option or a GPP type of play on the slate. We'll look at Carter for Chicago as well. Her minutes have been up the last few games. She's been a little bit inconsistent in the minutes so far this season. She seems to be somewhat of a streaky player, but she is cheap enough today that she has some upside, though her ceiling is not too much higher than her price point requires because she needs about 27 fantasy points to pay off here, and she seems to be a bit bare bust. So she is a very kind of GPP slash Hail Mary play on this one. Jordan Horston is a player I do like a lot today for Seattle. Another positive matchup option here for against Indiana. Now she has averaged 22 fantasy points against Indiana this season, which is about where she's priced for this game. Though she has 30 fantasy point upside and her price has skyrocketed the last few games. Still, she has a low floor, but playing Indiana's lame defense gives her some upside, and she's already done pretty well against them so far this season. And she's been shooting it pretty well the last few games, so I look for her to have some opportunity here. So she does have some inconsistencies with her rebounds and assists, and that can lower her ceiling here in the slate. But she's a good value play from the most part here. Then we'll look at Harris for Connecticut. Tasha Harris for Connecticut is a little bit of scoring dependent, but she should get the minutes required to pay off here. A little cheaper than expected, averaging 22 fantasy points against in Washington this season. So she's definitely a viable option on the slate. Though she does have a little bit of a low floor, but she has a good ceiling as well. So she's definitely worth a look here. Emily Inkster has been starting the last couple of games with the injuries to Washington. Now, she doesn't have a great matchup here against Connecticut, but if she draws a start again, if Alea Edwards is out again, then she's going to have some upside. She is doing pretty well as and getting that, 18 or more minutes. She's had 3 straight games over 19 fantasy points. She does need about 20 fantasy points to pay off here, but if Edwards is out, she has 25 to 26 fantasy point upside. And so we'll have to wait and see about the injury situation for Edwards. Right now, she's questionable. So, but I do think I think Inkster has some upside on the slate if she gets that starting potential. Now we're going to get to Chelsea Gray for the Vegas Aces. Now she's only played 2 games. Her minutes have been limited so far. She's ramping up here, so I do think her minutes get closer to 20 today. She has not scored the ball well so far, but she has been decent and other stats, and I think she has a lot of upside. She's normally a starter for her team, and she averaged 15 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds last year. So she definitely has a lot of upside, and she's so cheap that she has some potential here. She's dropped $500 from where she started when it comes to knowing that she's going to be on a limit. So she only needs 20 fantasy points to pay off here. I think she's definitely capable of that in a positive matchup here against Chicago. Even though it is a little bit of a tough defensive matchup, it should be okay. I think she does draw a lot of potential on the slate as a good play overall from a fantasy perspective. I think she's relatively safe, I guess is the way I would look at it. Tiffany Hayes for Las Vegas is one of the cheaper plays that you could consider today as well. She's been playing 20 plus minutes a game lately. She will probably get double digit fantasy points. The question is if she can get over 20, which she has done a few times. Playing enough minutes here, it is not a super ideal situation, but she is somebody that has some potential on the slate. Lindsay Allen for Chicago also in play today is a dirt cheap play. Now her minutes have actually been pretty good the last few games, but she has really failed to do a lot with them. She's just been really inconsistent. And so I do think she can score enough fantasy points to pay off here, but she's a high risk, high reward type play. Probably my favorite play of the sub 6,000 price point plays are Walker Kimbrough for Washington. Her minutes have been pretty consistent the last 6 or 7 games with around 20, and she's scoring 12 to 20 fantasy point games in most of these. Now she does need 16 fantasy points to pay off here, and she's averaged 13 against Connecticut. But I think she's relatively safe to help you when it comes to just scoring double-digit fantasy points at the very least at this price point. She can help you pay up at other positions or to other players, and she also fits in the guard position, which is a little bit weaker today. Now Tiffany Mitchell is also in play for Connecticut. She's kind of a one-off here, but she's dirt cheap at $4,000, though she is very scoring dependent. She's had some good games, and she's been playing 20 minutes a game. She doesn't need a ton of fantasy points to pay off, but she is very scoring dependent, and she has really failed to she's had some really low floor games. She has a very low floor, but she can pay off on the slate, but she's high risk. So pretty much what I have for the slate. I think AJ Wilson is a top tier play, but I think there's a lot of ways you can build these lineups. Definitely Angel Reese is in play. Of course, Seattle has the best matchup on the slate by quite a bit against Indiana, who is a porous defense. So overall, I think the slate will be pretty solid. It should be high scoring. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.